Hello, citizens of Earth, and welcome aboard Station 204. So glad to have you here with us for this edition of Tomorrow News. We got a lot to go over. Ryan has a slew of Starship updates. We like the moon and asteroids as well. We've got a very active sun starting to pop off with Dr. Tamitha Skov in our space weather, and I'm going to talk some launches and arrivals as well. Now, before we get started, of course, just want to let you know, if you like what we do here at Tomorrow, don't forget to subscribe to us, like our videos, set up notifications, share us everywhere you can, even comment below. Now, let's go ahead and get this Tomorrow News started. Hey Ryan, take it away.
It was a historical day for SpaceX as the launch of Starlink 14 marked their 100th launch in history. At 11:31 Coordinated Universal Time on October the 24th, the B-106-SO booster lifted out of Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, carrying 60 Starlink satellites into orbit. The first stage then made its way back down for another smooth touchdown on Just Read the Instructions, although it wasn't so smooth for the camera on board. This launch also marks the second quickest booster turnaround in SpaceX history, taking just one more day than the fastest, which was between Crew Demo 2 and Anasis 2. This very cool video was also posted by SpaceX, and it definitely sent a chill down my spine.
Liftoff of the Falcon 9. Falcon 9 has cleared the tower. First stage propulsion, healthy.
Good 1, 2 rock both stages.
Propulsion is nominal. Nico.
The Falcon has landed.
Contact ignition.
And it isn't just the Falcon getting in on the act of firing some really powerful engines, it's been Starship as well. All I can really say here is, boy, is it powerful. Following this burn of the three Raptors, the nose cone section of SN8 has been picked up by one of the largest cranes available to the team in Boca Chica, and simplified, it has been strapped to the top of a stainless steel silo that's been designed to go to space. It absolutely blows my mind that this machine is meant to be able to fly up to 15 kilometers, turn itself around and belly flop back down to Earth and land again. But do you remember when the lunar Starship was announced? Well, a Starship nose cone painted in white with the US flag and the NASA worm logo on it has been spotted in Boca Chica, so I'll let you make your own mind up on what that could be.
Heck yeah, lunar Starship. I mean, even if that's a mock-up, it's pretty heckin' sweet looking. And I gotta say, I love the NASA worm logo, the correct NASA logo that they have on it. Thanks for that update, Ryan. And we're gonna keep ourselves a little bit loony because there is an announcement that just came out with a study that was done by NASA and the German space agency DLR that has to do with the moon that may help make the case for Artemis a little bit stronger. The Stratospheric Observatory for Infrared Astronomy is one of those amazing ideas. Take an infrared telescope about 2.5 meters across, put it in the back of a Boeing 747 SP, and then fly it up to an altitude where most of the infrared wavelength blocking water vapor is well below it, and perform world-class scientific observations without having to fly your instruments into space. So what's the big deal here? Because there's water on the moon, right? I mean, we have a lot of evidence that suggests that yes, indeed, at the poles of the moon in permanently shadowed craters, there should be lots of water ice for us to use there. Well, this water is not found anywhere near the poles of the moon. Water on the moon can only exist in two states, as a solid with water ice or as a gas with water vapor. Liquid water needs the right temperature range, 0 to 100 degrees Celsius, and the right atmospheric pressure, which here on Earth, that's about 101 kilopascal at sea level. Temperatures on the moon are not ideal. They range from a bitter cold minus 173 Celsius all the way up to a burning plus 127 Celsius. And although the moon does technically have an atmosphere, it's at a pressure of 3 times 10 to the negative 15 Pascal. Another way to look at that, take the atmosphere of the moon, strip it away from the moon, and weigh it, and you would have about 10 metric tons of material. That's right, 10 metric tons of atmosphere is spread over the entirety of the moon. So can you even call that an atmosphere? Well, it's there, so yeah, but it ain't much. Now, the reason that this water being detected is so big a story is that no, it's not in those permanently shadowed craters. They found it in regular places that are actually exposed to direct sunlight. Now, it wasn't a surefire bet that water didn't exist in areas that the moon was exposed to the lunar day-night cycle, but it was considered highly unlikely because the conditions just aren't conducive for allowing water to exist. But that study found that there was water there in concentrations of 1 to 400 parts per million. So that is a set of data that is a little bit hard to argue with. So what is actually going on here? What do we mean by water in areas of the moon that are exposed to the lunar day-night cycle? Well, in truth, presently, no one knows how these water molecules got there, or how they're staying there, or how deep they may go into the lunar subsurface. Some hypotheses being thrown around are that the water could arise from chemical interactions between the solar wind and molecules present on the moon's surface, or there could be very small globules of glass that form when meteoroids impact the lunar surface and heat its material due to the sudden influx of kinetic energy, i.e. the meteoroid stopping very quickly into the lunar surface. And if that meteorite contains water, that could be captured in the superheated globules of material. So the discovery of this water adds a little bit more weight to the exploration and scientific justification for NASA's Artemis program. If the water is there and it's outside of the poles, we don't have to land just at the poles. We could go to other places on the moon, and that may be easier for us to get there. So what you're looking at is maybe the beginnings of that infrastructure to make spaceflight sustainable for humans in the future. And here at TMRO, we like that almost as much as a spoon. Now, it wasn't just the moon's surface that was getting an up-close gander this week. No, OSIRIS-REx, NASA's asteroid mission to Bennu, was getting up close and friendly with its surface as well. OSIRIS-REx is one of the greatest backronyms anyone has ever made. It stands for Origins, Spectral Interpretation, Resource Identification, Security, Regolith, Explorer. Whew. And it was launched from Earth in 2016 on a United Launch Alliance Atlas V in the rare Power Slide 411 configuration. It performed a quick flyby of Earth a year later in 2017, and the spacecraft arrived at the target asteroid Bennu in December of 2018. It's an exciting mission because its target, asteroid Bennu, is actually a potentially hazardous object. It has a 1 in 2,700 chance of hitting the Earth at some time in the late 22nd century, which actually places it at the second most dangerous, potentially hazardous object that we currently know of. And when OSIRIS-REx arrived at Bennu, it threw a really big curveball. Radar observations from Earth had shown Bennu had a diamond-like shape, and it looked to have a very smooth surface consisting of regolith, with pieces likely no bigger than a few centimeters in size. But as the images from Bennu got better and better, it became very clear that the surface was anything but smooth. It was, simply put, rubble. The spacecraft was designed to move into an area roughly 1,700 square meters in size to boop Bennu to grab its sample. But after an extensive mapping campaign, the prime location for OSIRIS-REx to drop down into was a paltry 84 square meters in size. Just to give you a little bit of context about how big those two measurements are, they originally were hoping that an area about the size of 100 parking spaces would be available for OSIRIS-REx to dip down into and boop Bennu for the sample. But when they found a spot that was sufficient to allow OSIRIS-REx to do that, it was only big enough for 5 parking spaces. Yes, from 100 down to 5 in size. Now, never bet against NASA's engineers because they tend to make things happen. And on October 20th at 22:13 Universal Time, after several rehearsal descents to the Nightingale landing site, the touch-and-go sample acquisition mechanism on the end of OSIRIS-REx's robotic arm made contact with the jumbled surface at a speed near 10 centimeters per second, landing within 1 meter of the targeted area. A nitrogen gas bottle fired, disturbing surface material so it could travel up into the collection system, and after 6 seconds of booping the surface of Bennu, OSIRIS-REx fired its thrusters and backed out to a safe distance. Now, the images taken actually show that the TAGSAM collector landed on top of a 20-centimeter sized rock, but it crushed it, and that means that broken material was likely captured with all of the other material that was pulled into the collector. Now, NASA officials said that if OSIRIS-REx was able to collect 60 grams of material from Bennu, they would consider the mission a success. And when the engineers finally took images of TAGSAM after it had been brought up, they saw that there was a very big problem. Now, you're probably expecting me to say that TAGSAM showed no evidence of a sample captured, which wouldn't be a big deal. OSIRIS-REx has enough nitrogen aboard for multiple sample return capture attempts. But the problem encountered is actually the literal opposite. TAGSAM was overflowing, literally. Bits just floating out in a way as it seemed the collection system was literally overfilled. That means there could possibly be a kilogram or more of material in there, which, if there is, whoa, that is a fantastic problem to be having. Plans were to spin the spacecraft to see how much of a change in the moment of inertia there was. This would allow ground controllers to determine just how much mass of sample there is on board. But that was decided against immediately. In fact, all planned movement of the spacecraft was canceled, except for essential activities to make sure that no additional sample loss occurred. Engineers then devised a plan to carefully move the samples into the return capsule as gently as possible, and they did so, successfully sealing them in on October 23rd, and they will return in 2023. Missions like OSIRIS-REx are critical to our understanding of protecting ourselves here on Earth. Impact events that could end life as we know it, they are not a matter of if, they are a matter of when. And sure, they're few and far between on a human timescale, but as we always like to say, you know why the dinosaurs aren't around? They didn't have a space program. Now, it's not just planetary defense that OSIRIS-REx is also helping with. Those samples are going to tell us what Bennu is made out of. And that's going to be important if you're thinking about humanity's future out in space with things like asteroid mining or resources with ice and other things that you can find potentially at asteroids. So that future that a lot of us are excited for, well, OSIRIS-REx is going to be delivering that in just a few years. So I'm super stoked to see how much of a sample it got. Like, was it a big sample? Was it a little sample? I'm very excited, and I can't barely hold it in. So let's go ahead and move on to something that also excites me so much I could barely hold it in, and that is space traffic, where we have had a return and several launches this week. Up in low Earth orbit, Soyuz MS-16 carrying Soyuz commander Anatoly Ivanishyn, Soyuz flight engineer Ivan Wagner, and Soyuz engineer Chris Cassidy undocked at 23:31 Universal Time on October 21st. After backing away to a proper distance over the course of several hours, around 0100 Universal Time on October 22nd, Soyuz MS-16 fired its thrusters to slow down just enough to allow it to enter into the Earth's atmosphere, which it did successfully, touching down under parachute in a cloud of dust on the steppe of Kazakhstan with the 3 astronauts aboard at 0154 Universal Time. All 3 space travelers were carefully removed from the descent module and in good spirits. At 1908 Universal Time on October 25th, a Soyuz 2.1B rocket lifted off from the Pleistix Cosmodrome carrying a single satellite payload for Russia's GLONASS navigation system constellation. A Fregat upper stage successfully placed the 3rd GLONASS-K satellite into its proper orbit. GLONASS-K is an update of the design of the majority of the current GLONASS satellite fleet, with the K variant designed to have a longer operational lifetime and increase navigation accuracy to within tens of centimeters. China launched a Long March 2B from the Xicheng Satellite Launch Center on October 26th at 15:08 Universal Time. Carrying 3 satellites as a part of the Yaogan 30-07 mission, China declared the mission a complete success. Now, they are claimed to perform remote sensing duties of the Earth's magnetic environment, but defense analysts believe that they are actually used for signals intelligence for the Chinese military. Lifting off from Rocket Lab Launch Complex 1A on New Zealand's Mahia Peninsula, a Rocket Lab Electron left the pad at 21:21 Universal Time on October 28th. The mission, named In Focus, carried 10 SuperDove remote sensing CubeSats for Planet and Canon's CSat-2B Earth imaging satellite, flying a copy of the Canon satellite that was lost during Rocket Lab's Electron launch failure back in July. All 11 satellites were successfully placed into low Earth orbit, and a little hot swap was done. Bing! And here are your upcoming launches. And for this week's space weather, here's Dr. Tamitha Skov.
Space weather this week is getting very exciting. Not only are we dealing with a solar storm right now that has brought us up to active conditions and brought some aurora clear down to mid-latitudes, but the storm isn't over. This is due to some fast solar wind from a big coronal hole, and the largest finger of that coronal hole has not rotated into the Earth strike zone yet, but it's just about to. And this means we could bump us up to storm levels and bring us even more aurora, maybe even more intense aurora that we've already seen. But believe it or not, this is not the only story. As we take a look at the front-sighted sun, you can look in the eastern limb up on the north. There is a gorgeous filament. This is that filament bridge I was telling you about over the past week or so. Look at that. It finally erupts in a gorgeous display, and it's created a solar storm, but it is not Earth-directed. It's actually moving towards stereo, and we'll talk more about that in a second. But that's not the only story either. We also have region 2776 that's rotating off of the sun's west limb, but we have 2 new regions, including a new sunspot region that's going to be labeled 2778 here in the southern hemisphere. We have a bright region in the northern hemisphere. Both of those are showing signs of activity, so we could be getting some small flares from that and a little bit of noise on the radio bands. So you amateur radio operators and emergency responders, get ready for that. That's going to add to the already kind of disturbed conditions we have due to this solar storm. So sorry that propagation, especially on Earth's night side, is not all that great right now. And now it looks like maybe on the day side you're going to get a little sizzle as well. So you're going to have to deal with that. Now, as we switch to our far-sighted sun, this is stereo A, and it's looking at the sun pretty much from the side. You can see that in the northern hemisphere, that big long filament, and you can also see how far it extends. As a matter of fact, as we switch to 304 angstroms, this is the red sun. Sorry, the images don't look all that good, but that's beacon images. These are the real-time images that we get. Better quality images come later, but in real time, it's good enough to see. Look at this massive filament as it launches off the sun. Oh my goodness, it's almost the entire extent of the sun in stereo's view. This is a big filament. It's the biggest one we've seen launch in solar cycle 25, and it is definitely indicating what is to come as this cycle continues to ramp up. Now, meanwhile, back on the green sun, you can see the bright region in the southern hemisphere. This may be region 2775 as it's beginning to rotate back into stereo's view. It is still launching solar storms on the sun's far side, so we just have a ton of activity to watch, and it looks like solar storms are definitely ramping up, which is good news for aurora photographers, and the bright regions are going to continue to increase that solar flux. So it looks like solar cycle 25 is continuing to give us some good news. For more details on this week's space weather, including that snake-like filament eruption and how the current solar storming might affect you, come check out my channel or see me at spaceweatherwoman.com.
And as we wrap up this episode of Tomorrow News, I want to thank all of you who helped contribute to make the shows of tomorrow possible. That's right, the reason that we are capable of being able to do this is you. We can't do this without you. We can't have Station 204. We can't have transport back and forth from it. We can't have the cool patches that I'm going to hand out if you find me at the launch. We can't do any of that without your help. So if you'd like to help us here at Tomorrow, head on over to youtube.com/TMRO/join and look at all of the levels of support that you can join at, the rewards that you can get, and hey, you've got some Discord rewards there, which is pretty cool. Get your own channel at the escape velocity level, and you can talk directly to us. So if you want to tell us something, that's a pretty good way of going about it. And of course, watching the shows of Tomorrow, subscribing to us, liking our videos, setting up notifications, and sharing our Tomorrow News episodes and our upcoming live shows as far and wide as you can is also an incredible help as well. And that's Seco 7 for this week's edition of Tomorrow News. Thank you all so much for watching, and until the next one, remember, stay safe, stay healthy, and keep exploring. Or there could be very small globules of glass. Globules of glass. That was good for me to write two very difficult words right next to each other. Well, actually, yeah, they're two difficult words. Water existed in areas where it would be exposed to the lunar day-night cycle. It was sort of theorized and hypothesized. That was for you.